Now, you'd think that millionaires would be happy with the houses they live in, but sometimes life just gets in the way and their mansions suffer. I'm Bob from World 5 List. Join me as I tell you about 10 amazing abandoned millionaire mansions. Number 10. Carleton Villa. William Wyckoff was a typewriter magnate back in the 1800s, and his wealth was rather significant. So much so that he decided to build a summer home for himself, one that would be beautiful, extravagant, and allow him to host parties for his friends in a nice locale. Unfortunately, this is where things begin to take a turn for the worse, because a month before the home was ready to be moved into, his wife would die, and then William himself just moved in and died on the very first night of living there. But that's not the end of the story, because his son inherited the house, and then during the Great Depression, the family lost all of their wealth, and thus the house fell into disrepair. General Electric would buy the house with the desire to destroy it, but before that happened, they allowed anyone who was interested to come in and buy materials from within, kind of like an estate sale. But before GE tore it down, World War II took place, and that's when they abandoned the house entirely. These days, it's still there, and you can actually buy it, and the land that it's on is actually pretty good. The catch, though, it's going to cost you around just $500,000 to even get into the house, and because of the sale that GE did, you'll be spending millions of dollars to fix it up right. Number 9. Perdido Castle. Perdido Castle is located in the Ukraine, built in the 1600s, and was a castle of great design, especially the interior, which apparently had some great furniture. As we all know, it's very important in a castle, right? Anyway, everything was going just fine until World War I would hit, and that's when Russian soldiers burst in and actually burned the interior up. After the war's end, the castle went to a prince, who then decided that the best option was to take the remaining good furniture and get it out of the castle, and then take it to Brazil. But it gets worse. The castle was then transformed into a tuberculosis sanitarium by the Soviet Union after the Second World War, and during that stint, it again caught on fire and burned for 3 weeks. Currently, there are efforts going on via the Lviv Gallery of Arts to try and return it to its former glory, but given all that's happened to it, it's probably going to take a while. Number 8. 3 mansions, 1 dead owner. What's better than having a mansion? Well, having 2 mansions. And even better than that, having 3 mansions. But when you don't take care of them and you don't leave an heir to them in your will, they become abandoned. Who would have such wealth to own 3 mansions in 3 different states? Well, that was Huguette Clark. She was actually an heiress, one to a deep copper fortune, and I do mean deep. But like certain kinds of millionaires, she was a recluse. In fact, when she died in 2011, it was found out that she had been in a hospital room for decades. She was 104 years old, and since she was in the hospital, that meant that she wasn't at home. But she did have caretakers, and they kept them up to shape in case she ever did return, but sadly it didn't happen. To further anger you and put it into context, she also had a 42-room apartment on 5th Avenue in Manhattan, a $24 million Connecticut chateau, and a palatial Santa Barbara estate valued at $100 million. Like I said, it's a deep fortune. The true tragedy here, though, is that one of the homes she hadn't even been to in over 50 years, and one of the others she never even sat foot in at all. So what is the state of them now? Well, the Connecticut home is up for sale, and the palatial estate is open to the public. So I bet they'll love the house. And now for number 7. But if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. And if you're new here, be sure you're subscribed. We're at almost 1 million subs. Get it up there, guys. Number 7. Chateau Miranda. Here's a mansion that's abandoned out of stubbornness, because the Chateau Miranda was built in 1861 in Belgium, and as you can see, it's a beautiful place. They actually had an English architect come in to design it, and it was lived in by a family for some time until the National Railway Company of Belgium took it over during World War I. Then in 1991, it became abandoned and remains that way up to this day. Why? Well, there are many factors. One of them is the family, who still holds some of the rights to the place, and they refuse to turn it over to the city. Given that they were taken over by a railroad company, I'm not going to blame them for resisting. Number 6. Hafodounos Hall. Now we stay in Belgium. In 1861, Hafodounos Hall was constructed and actually built to replace an older building that had been on the grounds previously. The place was made and bought by Henry Robertson Sandbach. His family had actually bought the estate to the place earlier and had only now gotten to making the mansion that they wanted. In the 1930s, members of the family sold the house along with the land, and ever since then it's been in use for various things. It was once a school for girls, then became a college for accounting, and eventually a nursing home. Quite a diverse lineup. Fast forward to 1993, when the house was closed down and eventually fell into disarray, including being burnt up by arsonists. Naturally, it would be abandoned until it was purchased by a new owner, and hopefully they'll have better luck with it. Number 5. Hollis Ian Hall. Here's another case of irony when it comes to why a mansion was abandoned. Hollis Ian Hall can actually be found in New York, and it's kind of old, being built in 1890, but then 11 years after it was then shut down. The story's not over for it, though. It would be bought a few years later and turned into the Bennett School for Girls, and because of the size of the mansion, it was actually able to both be a school and a home. Naturally, the girls that went to this school were from prominent families. At the time, though, girls-only schools were really popular. It soon became fine for boys and girls, though, to go to the same school, and thus the families of the girls took them on to other places. Without enough students, the school would go bankrupt in 1978 and had to close down once again. It remains abandoned even to this day. Number 4. The Bannerman Castle. This story's almost too good to be true. In the 1900s, there was a man named Francis Bannerman, Scottish, having big ideas, and also having lots of money. He then went to New York and bought a small island for himself and called it, of course, Bannerman Island. He then decided to make a big billboard for his military surplus business by building a castle. By 1918, he had died, but his surplus within the castle didn't. That was until 1920, when 200 tons of ammunition exploded, destroying a large chunk of the castle. But wait, there's more. In 1969, a fire would torch the rest of the castle just for good measure. Then, in 2009, 1/3 of what was left then collapsed. Maybe we should label this Bannerman luck. I'm just saying. Number 3. A round mansion. What's that? Back in Belgium again? Well, trust me, the house is worth it, and it'll leave you scratching your head by the end of what I have to tell you. While it's not clear when the round mansion was built, one thing is painfully clear. Something happened to its former tenants. No, there's not blood spread over the walls or a body to be found, but the mansion was abandoned in the 1990s and nobody really knows why. Eventually, a photographer would go in and take pictures of what was inside, and there was a lot. Judging by the furniture and items inside, whoever lived there was very wealthy, but then that raises the question of where did they go? Their departure must have been sudden, as they left a ton of things behind and never returned. Is this another haunted mansion? Did something happen to the family that history didn't record? Nobody knows for sure. By the way, here's another thing to ponder. Despite all the valuables that are in the house, it's never been looted. How weird. Number 2. German Physician Mansion. I don't know if it's poetic or actually creepy that one of the abandoned mansions on my list just so happens to be from Germany, and like the last entry, there's a lot of mystery to it. What is known, though, is that there was a family living there, but then they suddenly abandoned the place a little over 20 years ago. The family itself apparently was pretty reclusive, which is why no one noticed that they were gone at first. And like the entry before, the house is full of objects from them. Stuff that you wouldn't just leave behind unless you absolutely had to. Unlike my previous entry, though, there was a room that's creepy beyond mention. Because in the mansion was a physician's room, complete with the tools of the trade to get the job done, and also a piece of a kidney left behind. Now, that might give you a slight explanation to the disappearances, because the urban explorer Daniel Marbo found headstones on the property and believes that the family died in a car accident, and whoever took care of the house after them died soon after. The truth? The answer is just unknown. Number 1. Steve Jobs' mansion. Steve Jobs was a legend in the tech industry, and it was because of him that certain inventions became the staples of our lives, like the mouse that you use for your computer. He also helped to invent Pixar, so props for that. But he wasn't immune to having an abandoned mansion, and a pretty famous one at that. He bought the Jackling House, a mansion belonging to a former copper magnate. He lived in the house for a decade in the 80s and then turned it into a rental property. And then it just eventually was left for decay. To his credit, though, he did want to repair the home and even made plans to demolish the property and build it from the ground up. But unfortunately, he had to fight the locals in court, and by the time that he got the rights to do what he wanted, he had gained pancreatic cancer and died in 2011. The mansion, meanwhile, remains exactly how it was. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these mansions? Have you ever been to any of them? And is there one that you'd like to go and visit? Let me know all about it in the comments below. Be sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time on World 5.